The following days at the spaceport felt like a blur. The investigation into the sabotage continued, but no matter how hard Lissa searched, no one seemed to know anything. Her officers had questioned everyone, from engineers to pilots. But the answers were always the same, nothing unusual. But Lissa knew something was wrong every time she looked at Drether. Now fully repaired thanks to Varak's careful work, the unease in her chest grew. The dragon was almost as strong as before, its wings powerful and its movements fluid. But deep down, Lissa could feel the presence of something hidden. The sabotage hadn't just damaged Drether's systems. It had torn something inside her, something she wasn't sure she could fix. Late one evening, Lissa stood alone in the hangar. Drether rested on the ground, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He was completely still now, as if waiting for her orders. She walked over to him, her boots echoing in the quiet space. She reached out a hand to rest on his side, feeling the steady pulse of energy beneath the surface. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that had been eating at her for days. Who could be behind this? She thought, someone in my own ranks? The thought didn't sit right with her. She had worked hard to build trust, to lead her people through battles and difficult decisions. Yet now, the cracks in that trust seemed too wide to ignore. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, lost in thought, but a soft voice broke the silence. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? Lissa turned to find Varak standing at the entrance of the hangar, his hands tucked into the pockets of his work suit. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of concern in his eyes. About the sabotage? Lissa asked, her voice quiet but sharp. How can I not think about it? Drether is just the beginning. Whoever did this, they know how much he means to me. They're trying to take everything from me. Varak stepped closer, his eyes on Drether. I get it, but you need to focus. You can't let fear cloud your judgment. Lissa glanced at him, irritation flashing across her face. You don't understand. I've spent my life building an empire. Now, someone wants to tear it all down from the inside. I do understand, Varak said, his voice firm. I'm not here to lecture you, Commander, but if you're looking for someone to blame, you might need to start looking at the bigger picture. You've been focusing on finding a traitor, but sometimes the answers aren't where we think they are. Lissa stared at him, confused. What do you mean? Are you saying I'm wasting my time? I'm saying that maybe you're so focused on the betrayal that you're missing what's right in front of you, Varak said softly. Sometimes the real problem isn't the sabotage itself. It's what the sabotage reveals. Lissa's brow furrowed as she processed his words. I don't understand. Varak's eyes softened. You've spent so much time fighting against the world, building your power. But what if it wasn't just Drether that was sabotaged? What if this whole thing is a reflection of something deeper? Lissa felt her heart race, her mind suddenly racing with possibilities. What if this wasn't just about Drether? What if the sabotage was a warning, a reflection of something bigger that she hadn't been paying attention to? I've been so focused on maintaining control, on holding onto everything, Lissa murmured, more to herself than to Varak. But maybe I've been blind to something else. Varak didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer, resting a hand on the dragon's side. You've built a legacy, Commander, but sometimes even the strongest things can crack under the weight of too much pressure. You can't always control everything. Lissa felt a sudden rush of emotion she hadn't expected. Regret, maybe. Fear, definitely. She had always prided herself on being strong, on never letting her guard down. But now, as she stood there, staring at the dragon, she realized how much she had ignored in her quest for power. The sabotage wasn't just about Drether, it was about her, too. I've been so focused on winning, she said quietly, almost in disbelief. I thought that if I could control everything, if I could make Drether the perfect weapon, I'd never have to face the truth. Then I might not be in control after all. Varak turned to face her, his expression softening. It's not about control, Commander. It's about understanding, about knowing when to fight and when to let go. Lissa stood in silence for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words. She had never really allowed herself to think this way. She had been so focused on winning, on finding that she hadn't noticed the cracks forming around her. Now, those cracks were deep, and she wasn't sure if she could fix them all. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel like everything I've worked for is falling apart." Varrock stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "You're not alone. Drether is here. I'm here, and you have your people. But you have to be willing to trust them, Commander. Trust yourself, too." Lissa's eyes softened as she looked at him. The arrogant warrior from the Tyrol Dominion had never been the type to ask for help. But standing here, with Varrock's words sinking in, she realized something important. She had been blind to her own weaknesses, but perhaps it wasn't too late to change. For the first time in a long while, Lissa felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe, with the right choices, it could be a new beginning. She turned to Drether, her hand resting on his side once again. The dragon's eyes glowed softly, as if understanding her thoughts. Lissa looked back at Varrock, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me a different way." Varrock smiled back, the corners of his eyes crinkling in that quiet, unassuming way that was so different from the usual arrogance of the Tyrol. "I didn't do anything. You figured it out yourself." Lissa looked down at the dragon, her thoughts more focused than they had been in days. "You're right. It's not about control. It's about trust. And maybe it's time I trusted the people around me." Drether shifted slightly under her touch, as if agreeing with her decision. And for the first time in a long while, Lissa felt like she was making the right choice. "I don't know where this will lead," she said softly, "but I think I'm ready to find out." Epilogue. A new beginning in the days that followed. Lissa took a different approach. She worked with Varrock to finish the final repairs on Drether, ensuring that the dragon would be stronger than ever. But more importantly, she began to open up to her people, trusting them to help rebuild what had been broken. With Varrock by her side, Lissa discovered that sometimes strength wasn't just about power or weapons. It was about understanding, patience, and the willingness to trust others. And as Drether soared through the skies above Zantara once again, Lissa knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for the entire Tyrol Dominion. The next morning, the spaceport was bustling with activity. The sun rose slowly over Zantara, casting long shadows as the workers and engineers continued their routines. But today, there was a noticeable tension in the air. Word had spread that the Tyrol Dominion's prized cyber dragon had been sabotaged, and Lissa's investigation was in full swing. Lissa stood by Drether, watching the dragon stretch his wings under the warm sunlight. His movements were more graceful now, his body no longer stiff with malfunction. Drether was almost back to his full strength, though Lissa couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. She needed answers. She glanced over at Varrock, who was working on the final adjustments to Drether's systems. His movements were precise, calm, and methodical. While others might have rushed through the work, eager to finish, Varrock was different. He took his time, paying attention to every small detail as though it mattered. As she approached him, she couldn't help but admire the way he worked. He wasn't just repairing a machine. It was clear to her now he was building something stronger, something more alive. She had never seen anyone work with such care, even with the advanced tools her people used. "You're still not done?" she asked, her voice a little sharper than she intended. Varrock didn't look up, but he smiled slightly. "Perfection takes time," he replied simply, tightening a bolt with steady hands. Lissa couldn't help but shake her head in disbelief. "You really think that this is worth all the effort? A simple dragon? It's just a tool, a weapon." Varrock finally met her gaze, and for a moment, his eyes held a depth she hadn't noticed before. "No, Commander. Drether is more than just a tool. You might see him as a weapon, but he's a creation, something that lives, breathes, and like all life deserves respect." For a moment, Lissa was taken aback. She hadn't expected such a response. Most of her people, if they even thought about it, would see Drether as little more than an instrument of war. She certainly hadn't seen him the way Varrock did. She crossed her arms, more out of habit than anything else. "I don't have time for philosophy, Varrock. I need answers, and I need them fast. I understand, Varrock said, his voice steady. The sabotage isn't just about Drether. Whoever did this clearly knew how to bypass your systems, how to blend their technology with yours. This wasn't just a random attack, it was calculated. Lissa's eyes narrowed. So, you're saying the sabotage was engineered by someone who knows our technology? Exactly, Varrock replied. And that means someone close to you, Commander. The sabotage wasn't just technical. It was meant to send a message. A heavy silence hung between them. Lissa wanted to argue, to deny the possibility that someone within her own ranks could betray her. But deep down, she knew Varrock was right. It was too clean, too precise to be the work of an outsider. Who would do this? Lissa asked quietly, almost to herself. I don't know yet, Varrock said, his voice thoughtful. But I'm going to keep looking. We're getting closer. There's more hidden in Drether's systems, and I need to find it before it's too late, Lissa sighed, running a hand through her hair. She hated the idea of someone inside her own ranks working against her. But she also knew she couldn't ignore Varrock's insight. His understanding of Drether's systems had already saved her dragon's life. Maybe it would help her discover who was behind the sabotage as well. Do you think you can fix it completely? Lissa asked, turning her attention back to Drether. Varrock nodded. It'll take time, but yes, we just need to be careful. The sabotage was designed to look like a malfunction, but there's something more lurking in the system. I'm getting closer to the heart of it. Lissa took a step back, looking at the dragon again. His wings were no longer limp. They moved with purpose, stretching out fully as he tested them. Drether had always been a symbol of her power, and seeing him so vulnerable had shaken her. Now, however, thanks to Varrock's careful repairs, the dragon was stronger, more capable than before. It's hard to believe that a human fixed him, Lissa said, almost under her breath. She had never been one to praise others, especially humans. But now, she was beginning to see things differently. Varrock looked at her, his expression unreadable. It's not about being human, Commander. It's about understanding the problem, seeing things from a different angle. Sometimes, the solution isn't the one everyone expects. That's what makes humans different. Lissa tilted her head slightly, considering his words. So you're saying it's not just your tools that make you good. It's your way of thinking. That's right, Varrock replied, a slight smile touching his lips. Tools are just tools. It's how you use them that matters. Later that day, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the investigation into the sabotage continued. Lissa's officers had been combing through the spaceport, questioning those who had access to Drether. So far, no one seemed to know anything about the sabotage. But Lissa couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Someone was hiding something. She walked through the corridors of the spaceport, her thoughts swirling. Could someone so close to me be the traitor? She pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford to doubt her people, not yet. When she returned to the hangar where Drether was being kept, she found Varrock still working. He was bent over the dragon's side, his fingers moving swiftly as he made adjustments. His hands were covered in oil, and his face was focused, absorbed in his task. Lissa watched him for a moment, taking in the quiet determination in his movements. It was clear to her now that Varrock wasn't just a mechanic. He was someone who understood what others didn't. He saw problems where others only saw solutions. How close are you? Lissa asked, breaking the silence. Varrock straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm getting there. Just a few more tweaks, and we'll be able to fully sync Drether's systems again. Good, Lissa said, her voice firm. I don't care how long it takes. I need Drether at full strength. Now, I understand, Varrock replied. But it's not just about strength. We need to make sure this sabotage doesn't happen again. Whoever did this is smart, and we need to be smarter. Lissa nodded. I'm starting to believe you. So, what do we do next? Varrock paused for a moment, then looked at her, his eyes steady. We keep digging. Someone's out there, pulling strings. But we'll find them. Lissa met his gaze, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to let this slide. Whoever had betrayed her would pay. And with Varrock's help, she was determined to uncover the truth. Later that night, as Lissa lay in her quarters, Her thoughts were restless. The investigation had made little progress. Everyone in the spaceport seemed innocent. But Lissa couldn't shake the feeling that the traitor was closer than she thought. She had trusted her people for so long. The idea that one of them could be working against her was something she couldn't accept. But now, with Varak's insight, she had to admit that the sabotage had been too well planned to be anything else. Tomorrow, she would have answers. The following day, the spaceport was still quiet, its usual hum of activity subdued as the last few ships left for distant star systems. Lissa stood near her dragon, Drether, who now moved with more fluidity than before. His wings unfurled fully, the metallic tips glimmering in the soft light of Xantar's twin suns. The dragon was no longer the injured, crippled beast it had been when Lissa first arrived. Thanks to the steady hands of Varak, Drether was close to full strength. Lissa's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to find Varak walking toward her, his hands tucked into the pockets of his dark work suit. His face as calm and focused as always. "You're back again," Lissa remarked, her voice slightly teasing, but with an edge of admiration. She hadn't expected Varak to still be working on Drether after the repairs were supposedly complete. "Just checking on a few things," Varak said, his voice casual. "There are some areas that need to be adjusted for better stability. Small details." Lissa crossed her arms, but this time, her usual arrogance was gone. "I didn't think you'd still be here after the work was done." "I don't leave until the job's done right," he replied simply. His gaze flicked toward Drether, who was stretching his wings and testing his claws on the ground. "And I noticed something I didn't see yesterday." Lissa raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Varak gestured toward the dragon's tail. "See how it's twitching? The energy flows there are irregular. It could be a sign of a deeper issue. I'll need to recalibrate some of the neural pathways." Lissa looked at Drether more closely, but she didn't see what he was pointing out. Her gaze remained skeptical. "It seems fine to me. You're probably imagining things." Varak didn't respond at first, just moving over to Drether with that same careful precision. He placed his hand gently on the dragon's side, his fingers tracing the metal scales as he ran a diagnostic scan. The dragon hissed slightly, then relaxed under his touch. "What's wrong with it?" Lissa asked, her tone now more curious than defensive. Varak's expression grew serious. He tapped a few buttons on his handheld analyzer, and the readout flashed with data. "It's not the dragon itself," he said, his voice tight. "There's something off about the energy signatures." Lissa frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" Varak showed her the readout. "These signatures aren't natural. Whoever engineered Drether clearly knew what they were doing, but there's something inside that doesn't belong." He paused, scanning the dragon more closely. "There's a foreign energy source embedded in the core. It looks like a sabotage device." Lissa's eyes widened. "Sabotage? You mean someone tried to destroy Drether?" Varak nodded. "It's subtle, but yes. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They've used a combination of toxic energy and nanotech to disrupt Drether's core, slowly draining its power." Lissa's mind raced. Who would want to sabotage Drether? She thought the dragon was a symbol of her power, her strength in battle. The thought that someone had deliberately weakened her weapon, her greatest asset, was a bitter pill to swallow. She paced for a moment, trying to make sense of this revelation. But who would do this? The Tyrell Dominion doesn't have enemies who would try something like this. That's the question. Varak said, his voice calm but serious. "It's possible someone within your own ranks is responsible. Someone who knows how valuable Drether is and how to manipulate your technology." Lissa stopped pacing, turning sharply to face him. "Are you suggesting treason? That one of my own soldiers would betray me?" Varak didn't flinch. "I'm just saying that this wasn't an accident. The energy signatures are too precise to be a random malfunction." For a long moment, there was silence between them as Lissa considered the implications. If what Varak was saying was true, it meant that someone she trusted had deliberately sabotaged Drether. She couldn't accept that. "Not yet. I'll have the team investigate," she said, her voice hard. "But if you're wrong, Varak, I'll have you working the docks for the next 10 years. I don't take accusations like that lightly." Varak nodded without hesitation. Fair enough, but be careful. Whoever did this is dangerous. They've been hiding their tracks for a reason. The weight of his words sank in. But Lissa pushed it aside. No one betrays me. She wasn't going to let fear or doubt take root. Later that evening, Lissa convened with her closest advisors in a quiet, dimly lit room in the Spaceport's command center. Round the table sat her most trusted officers, their faces grim and tense as they reviewed the reports. Lissa stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed, her expression dark. "Drether has been sabotaged," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "I've been told it's not a random malfunction. Someone deliberately tampered with the Dragon's core, using technology we haven't seen before." A murmur of surprise spread through the room. Lissa continued, her voice steady but firm. "We need to figure out who is behind this. No one here is exempt from suspicion." One of her senior officers, Rillick, a tall alien with sharp features, spoke up. "Commander, are you saying someone within our own ranks is responsible for this? That's a serious accusation." "I don't know yet," Lissa replied, her eyes narrowing. "But Varrock seems to think so. And he's the one who found the sabotage." "Varrock?" Rillick looked surprised. "A human mechanic? How does he know so much about our technology?" Lissa shot him a sharp look. "That human mechanic saved Drether's life. I suggest we start taking him seriously." The room fell silent as the officers exchanged glances. They knew better than to question Lissa's decisions, but this was a new and dangerous situation. No one had ever accused one of the Tyrell Dominion's own people of such treachery. "We'll need to investigate further," Rillick said, breaking the silence. "But if someone in our ranks is involved, we could be facing more than just sabotage. This could be part of a larger plot." Lissa's fist clenched. "I won't let that happen. Whoever is behind this will pay. I'll get to the bottom of this." Outside the command center, Varrock was still working on Drether, making sure the dragon was as stable as possible while Lissa conducted her investigation. The dragon had recovered enough that it could move freely now, but there was still much to be done to fully restore its capabilities. Varrock glanced over his shoulder as Lissa's officers filed out of the command center. He could tell by the tension in their movements that something serious was unfolding. He didn't know what was going on inside that room, but he could guess. Lissa had always been confident, but now there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes whenever she looked at Drether, and Varrock knew better than to think she wouldn't do whatever it took to find the truth, whatever that truth turned out to be. The sun on Zantara was setting, casting long shadows over the spaceport. The once busy landing pads now stood quiet as the last ships made their way off the planet. But Lissa wasn't ready to leave yet. She stood beside her dragon, Drether, watching the creature's slow recovery. The dragon's wings had unfolded slightly, the metal-like edges glinting in the fading light. Drether's once dim eyes now glowed with a soft pulse, and his breathing was steadier. Varrock, the human mechanic, stood a few steps away, cleaning his tools. He had fixed the main issue with Drether's core, but he was still focused on the finer details. His hands moved with calm precision, adjusting the energy flows and repairing tiny faults that no one else had noticed. Lissa couldn't stop watching him. He wasn't using fancy tools or relying on automated devices like most engineers would. He was working with his hands, connecting circuits and recalibrating energy pots in ways that felt almost ancient. It was like watching a craftsman at work, not a mechanic. She crossed her arms, trying to hide her curiosity. "I have to admit, you're doing a good job," she said, her voice grudging but honest. Varrock glanced up and smiled slightly, though it was more out of politeness than pride. "I don't do it for the praise, Commander. Just making sure it's done right." Lissa raised an eyebrow. "I never thought I'd see the day when a human would be the one to repair a Tyrell cyber dragon." There was a pause as she studied the creature, which was now beginning to stretch its legs. "How did you learn to do this?" "It's not exactly easy work." Varrock shrugged as he wiped his hands on his suit. "On Earth, we didn't have all the fancy tech at first. People had to learn how to fix things with what they had, to be creative. Some things just need more than tools. They need patience and understanding." Lissa let out a small snort of disbelief. "Patience? I thought humans just relied on brute force to get things done." Varrock chuckled. though there was no malice in his voice. That's a misunderstanding. It's not about strength. It's about finding the problem, no matter how small or complicated, and fixing it the right way. The sound of Drether stretching his wings broke the silence between them. The dragon let out a low growl, and its eyes flickered. It was more alert now, stronger than it had been hours ago. The change was subtle, but it was clear to Lissa that Drether was far from the broken creature he had been. "You really fixed him, didn't you?" Lissa said softly, unable to hide her surprise. Varrock nodded. "He's not fully repaired yet. There are still some things to adjust, but he's alive again." Lissa walked around the dragon, inspecting it from every angle. Her expression shifted from skepticism to something closer to respect. "I have to admit, I didn't think it was possible. I thought you humans were just, well, too primitive to handle something this advanced. Everyone thinks that about humans," Varrock said, not looking up from his work. "But we get things done." There was a long pause. Lissa glanced at him, then at Drether, and finally let out a slow breath. I misjudged you," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest she was willing to come to one. Varrock didn't respond right away. He simply continued his work, focusing on the minor adjustments needed to fully restore Drether's flight systems. But when he did speak, it was with a quiet warmth. "It happens." Lissa didn't know how to respond to that. For the first time in a long while, she felt something unfamiliar: humility. The world she came from was one of strength, power, and technology far beyond the reach of most races. And yet here was this human, a species she had written off as primitive, outsmarting her expectations at every turn. Hours passed, and the spaceport became quieter. The stars were just beginning to light up in the darkening sky. Drether's wings now stretched fully, and its body was poised with a grace it hadn't shown since Lissa had first landed on Zantara. She couldn't stop staring at the dragon. "He's incredible," she whispered to herself. Varrock glanced at her, pausing in his work. "It's not just the machine. It's the way it's designed. The Tyrell know how to blend organic and artificial. It's a beautiful system." "Really? Beautiful?" Lissa repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You're calling it beautiful?" "It's a weapon," Varrock chuckled lightly. "It's both, I suppose. But that doesn't mean it's not beautiful. There's something impressive about how it can heal itself, adapt, and survive." Lissa felt a strange shift in her feelings. She had always seen Drether as an extension of herself, a tool of war. But now, seeing him in this state, alive, breathing, almost free, she couldn't help but appreciate the beauty in what had once only been a means to an end. "Can you fix it completely?" she asked, her voice quieter now, more vulnerable than she'd intended. Varrock looked thoughtful. "It will take time. It's not something that can be done in a single day, but I'm confident it will be back to full strength. Just needs some fine-tuning." Lissa hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but when it's done, I expect you to leave." She paused. "I can't have you thinking you've got something over on me." Varrock gave a small smile. "Understood, but I don't think you'll mind having me around when Drether's fully operational again." Lissa scowled, but the flicker of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "We'll see." Drether stirred again, flapping its wings gently, and Lissa couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride. The dragon had been her companion for years, and now, thanks to this unexpected human mechanic, it was stronger than it had been in a long time. "I owe you more than I thought," Lissa admitted, her voice sincere. Varrock's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the quiet of the spaceport enveloped them. "No need to owe. I just did what needed to be done." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was something new, something different. Lissa wasn't used to being around someone who didn't try to impress her, who didn't care for her status or power. Varrock was just him, and maybe that was something she could respect more than anything else. As night fell, the stars filled the sky above Zantara. Drether spread his wings wide, standing tall and proud once again. The dragon was ready to fly, and Lissa had no doubt it would be stronger than ever. But as she stood there, watching Varrock finish up the last few adjustments, she realized something. The human mechanic had done more than just fix her dragon. He had shown her something about strength and how it wasn't always about being the most powerful or the most advanced. Sometimes strength was in patience, in creativity, and in understanding what others couldn't see. For the first time, Lissa didn't see a human as an inferior being. She saw a partner, and that was something she hadn't expected. The spaceport on planet Zontara was alive with the sound of machines, engines, and distant voices echoing through the metallic halls. Silver ships rested in long rows under glowing lights, each one humming with quiet power. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and ozone. Technicians of many alien races moved like ants, busy with repairs and refueling. Among them was Varrock, a human mechanic known for his calm attitude and steady hands. He was not famous or rich, but everyone who had worked with him knew one thing: his machines never failed once he touched them. He wore a dark blue work suit, his sleeves rolled up, and his face slightly smeared with oil. His brown eyes held a quiet confidence that most people mistook for simple patience. That morning, a new ship landed on the far pad. Its hull was shining black with golden edges, shaped like a predator ready to strike. When the doors opened, a tall alien woman stepped out. Her silver armor glimmered under the sun, and her deep green eyes swept across the crowd with a look of pride. Her name was Lissa, a warrior from the Tyrol Dominion, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Walking beside her was a creature that caught everyone's attention: a large cyber dragon. Its scales a mix of living tissue and metal. Once, it must have looked beautiful and powerful, but now it limped, one wing bent awkwardly, sparks flickering along its tail. Its once bright eyes glowed weakly. The crowd whispered, "A dragon like that could destroy an entire fleet in battle." Seeing it so broken was strange. Lissa's expression was hard as she looked around. She spoke with a proud, commanding voice. "I need a mechanic," she announced. "Someone who can repair my dragon's neural core and flight system." One of the alien engineers, a short, insect-like being with shimmering wings, bowed slightly. "Most of our top engineers are busy, Commander Lissa, but we have one available." Lissa frowned. "Who?" The alien pointed toward Varrock, who was wiping his hands on a rag after finishing a repair. "That human, Varrock." Lissa's eyes narrowed. "A human? You must be joking." The insect alien buzzed nervously. "He's the best we have free right now. He's worked on many different systems: Terran, Xenian, even Dominion technology." Lissa crossed her arms, her silver armor reflecting the light. "Dominion technology is beyond primitive hands. Your kind uses wrenches and hopes for miracles. My dragon is not a toy. It's a living weapon." Varrock heard every word but said nothing. He calmly approached and stopped a respectful distance from her. "You said your dragon's neural core is damaged?" he asked softly. Lissa turned to him, clearly unimpressed. "Yes, its flight systems failed after the last skirmish. The power grid collapsed, and the neural circuits shorted out. You wouldn't understand the systems. It's made of living alloy and biosaptic fibers." Varrock nodded, not offended. "I've worked with hybrids before. I can take a look." Lissa's lips curved in a cold smile. "Fine, but don't touch anything you don't understand. If you make it worse, I'll have you cleaning dust from the landing pads for a year." The other workers glanced at each other awkwardly. Everyone knew Lissa's reputation: strong, proud, and not easily impressed. Varrock simply said, "Deal," and followed her toward the dragon. They reached the resting spot of the great creature. Up close, Drether the dragon was both beautiful and sad. His scales shimmered faintly, like metal trying to remember how to shine. His wings drooped, and his breathing was heavy. Varrock placed his hand gently on the dragon's side. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly like a living heart. He felt the rhythm of the machine, the heartbeat of its energy systems. "Hey, big guy," he said softly. "Let's see what's wrong." Lissa rolled her eyes. "It doesn't understand human speech." "Maybe not the words," Varrock replied. "But machines and living circuits can sense intent. They respond to care." She folded her arms again, clearly amused. "You really believe that, don't you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his toolkit and began working. His hands moved quickly, yet carefully, opening panels and checking wires. The dragon let out a low rumble but didn't resist. Varrock studied the core through a small scanner. The data was confusing, a mix of organic and artificial energy signatures. He frowned slightly. Strange. The systems are alive, but there's interference in the synaptic links. Lissa sighed impatiently. Of course there is. The neural matrix is fused with Tyrol biotech. You can't fix it with your primitive tools. Varrock didn't argue. He simply kept working. Using his small handheld analyzer, he traced the flow of energy through Drether's circuits. He found a burned section deep inside the wing joint apart. That most mechanics wouldn't think to check. He smiled slightly. Found it? Lissa raised an eyebrow. Found what? The real problem, he said, reaching for a microspanner. Your dragon isn't just injured, it's confused. Confused? She repeated, disbelief in her tone. Yes, Varrock explained. The neural core is receiving mixed signals from the organic part of its brain. It's trying to heal itself, but the synthetic processors are overriding the natural repair instinct. They're fighting each other instead of working together. Lissa blinked. That actually makes sense. Yeah, he said, adjusting a connection. You just need to stop the fight. With slow precision, he reconnected a series of wires, then used a gentle pulse tool to reset the biosignal. The dragon's eyes flickered brighter for a moment before dimming again. Lissa's posture changed slightly. It responded, she murmured. Not fixed yet, Varrock said, focused. But it's listening now. She watched him silently for a while, noticing how he moved. There was no arrogance, no wasted motion, just steady hands and quiet focus. Most Tyrol engineers she knew relied on automated tools, never getting their hands dirty. But this human worked like an artist sculpting something precious. Finally, Lissa spoke again, this time without mockery. How did your kind ever learn to repair things like this? Varrock chuckled softly. Humans are good at fixing what's broken. We've had to be. Back home, things didn't always work right. Machines, ships, even people. You learn to make do, find solutions no one else sees. Lissa was quiet. She didn't want to admit it, but his words felt honest. She had looked down on humans for their simplicity, but maybe that simplicity was their strength. After an hour, Varrock stepped back. For now, I've stabilized the core. It'll need a full sync later, but Drether should be able to move again, as if on cue. The dragon lifted its head weakly and let out a soft, metallic growl. Its eyes glowed brighter, and its broken wing twitched slightly. The crowd gasped, Lissa's mouth open, but no words came out. Varrock smiled faintly. Told you. Sometimes, the old ways still work. She looked at him, this quiet human with oil on his hands, and for the first time, she didn't see a primitive being. She saw someone who understood things deeper than circuits and codes. And though she didn't say it out loud, a small thought crossed her mind. Maybe I judged him too soon.